Hello and good morning friends, welcome to the CEC-UGC live lecture. Dear friends, with our ongoing series on Indian writing in English, today we would be talking on Derozio, Voice of Bengal Renaissance. And for this very discussion, we have once again with us in our studios Dr. Anand Prakash. Dr. Anand Prakash is a retired professor from the Department of English, University of Delhi. So dear friends, let's welcome our guest Dr. Anand Prakash and let's try to get in-depth knowledge on the topic Derozio, Voice of Bengal Renaissance. Hello sir, welcome to the DCET lecture.
Thank you, Geetika, and welcome viewers. Today's topic, as Geetika has announced, is Derozio, Voice of Bengal Renaissance. Now, Derozio, is an early 19th century poet, writer. He's also an educator. He also wrote, and he was a journalist. Now, imagine so many things he was able to do in his short career. When I say short career, my mind goes back to the time in which he lived, and very shortly his life was cut short, and he was able to live only for 23 or 4 years. He was born in 1809, 9 years after the century changed from the 18th to the 19th century, and he died in 1831. So it's a period of let's say 22 years, and in this period of 22 years, some years would have gone into what is called formation, the formative period. He would be reading, writing only when he was more than 10, which means that when he is 10 he is operating in 1820, and in 1823 or at the most 4, in 1827, when he's only 18 years, then he becomes a teacher. So imagine the kind of career he has, the kind of education he would have got on his own, the books that he might have read, the teachers he would have met and taken guidance from, the curiosity he enjoyed or would have enjoyed in his own time. All these are remarkable for us. At the age of 10, at the age of 12, at the age of 14, at the age of 18, if the person is able to cross over from primary education to secondary education to a career in a college as a teacher, was a huge job, and he performed it, and it's really astounding. There are examples, of course, of this kind of precocity, early growth. Some people grow up very early. They grow up, let's say, when others are merely copying and imitating ways of life and learning from them. So he has that precocity. He's a precocious person, but then he is that, and that is good for us, that is good for the country at the time, because such intellectuals coming with that freshness which he had in his early age would finally get conveyed through his writing, through his behavior, through his practice to the audience, through the people he came in touch with. So it's a young person, and when I was thinking of the examples, the name of Keats comes to mind. He also had the same kind of short life, and in that short life, Keats also achieved a lot. And imagine this interesting parallel between Derozio and Keats. They are contemporaries. Keats is active in England, and Derozio is active in India, and it's around the same time. And Keats' name has travelled from England to India. His poems are quite popular at the time when Derozio is reading and writing, and therefore Derozio is taking his inspiration from and his ideas and ideals from Keats, and I'll go into that a bit later. But then, if a young person gets inspired by another one from another country in a different language, then it's an experience that we can only think of, but cannot directly appreciate. So imagine that this person was there in the early 19th century as a curious, as a student, eager to learn. And when he learned, he imbibed it, he made it a part of his life and understanding. And soon, he would be giving out something still more fresh than, the one that he had, gotten and assimilated. So this is the kind of process through which some of the writers go, and when they become very successful communicators of emotion, of sentiments, of feelings, and of ideas. So this person does that in the beginning of his career. And when he's 18, then he joins the college as a teacher. So I'll be dwelling upon these things later on also. But then let me see as to what would have given the sense of idealism to this person, Derozio. His full name is Henry Louis Vivian Derozio. By no stretch of imagination can we think, that this person is an Indian. But he is an Indian, and his origin is mixed. His parentage is mixed. He has the Indian mother, and the father is Portuguese. And when the two marry, then of course, this boy comes into existence, and he must have taken his ideas, ideals, his grit, his determination, his flights of imagination from both the parents, from the mother as well as the father. And the two, I went over these things again in my mind to give a talk here. Then I also thought of the influence he might have had at that time from parents who were so very revolutionary. I'm using this word very carefully. So very revolutionary in their attitude that a Bengali woman, a woman from India, is marrying a Portuguese, and it's a kind of bonding that is more of love than marriage, and one can call it a love marriage. But then this thing is done in the early 19th century. That is important, and this would have given a sense of modernity to the very home in which the parents lived and where this child called Derozio was born. So we have this Henry Louis Vivian Derozio, word name, and he is born in 1809 and he dies in 1831. And these 22 years of his active life, I would say that even at the age of 6 or 7, this boy would be reading quite a bit. And the way he writes at the age of 10, at the age of 12, these things are available now. People have done research on his writing, and published is only a little, but there is more that is still unpublished, and people have now tried to come with this kind of a making up of the representation that he received, much later than he lived. So this person of mixed parentage, and the mother, giving him education, giving him, the sense of language, and the father giving him a sense of language, and neither of them being English. Portuguese is different from English. So which means that he had his education in India, in the Indian culture. He had his education in the Portuguese kind of ideas, and he was studying English. So three cultures, mix in his surroundings, and he's taking healthy, positive aspects of all in order to become Derozio, the poet. And this poet, is going to work wonders. In one word, if somebody has to sum up this person, then one would say modernity. He is a symbol of modernity. He is a person who will, talk about new ideas, and he will take his cue not from any tradition, not from any orthodoxy, not from any teaching or education. He will get it from life directly. So whatever is happening in 1810, 1815, 1820, that he is imbibing as something given, as something which is there, and therefore it has to be accepted, of course critically, but then it is to be accepted, and that is definitely different from what existed in the 18th century. In the 18th century, India was totally in doldrums. It was on the losing side. In the 19th century also, India had the same problem. It did not have any, light of idealism to guide it, to take it out of the morass in which it found itself placed, and therefore the young persons from cities like Calcutta, these people would be looking up as if to seek inspiration from somewhere else, and this person would look up, and what would he see in the sky? What would he see around him? Rivers and waters and trees and flowers, all that he would fall in love with. Therefore, it is this reality, it is this aspect of life in the 19th century India that becomes a part of the consciousness of Derozio, and he will then process it in his own mind. He will mix it, he will critically examine it, he will throw away areas which are not relevant to his liking, to his requirements, and then he will become a poet and express things which he has made his own. So this is the process that he has gone through, and this process is showing in his poetry of the time. I'll later on read out a few poems and also interpret them for my own benefit, and I'll share that interpretation with you, but that will come a little later. Let's go over this, a kind of biography which is of the intellectual in the making, which is of the poet in the making, which is of the thinker in the making. So let's think of a few opinions that people have expressed about Derozio, this person of 22 years age, who is there in India from 1809 to 1831, and this person then becomes a household name much later in India. He is known all over now. People talk of him as the father of Indian education, Indian poetry, Indian writing, and he is a kind of ancestor for us. And if we have this kind of a lineage from where to start, then we know that India's present then and its future lies in modernity. It doesn't like in old values. Old values had to perform their role when they were produced, but in the 19th century, what is being produced? And that is what is being produced is something that has to meet the requirements of the 19th century life. So this kind of a thing, makes him, standing out of most of the people in India, and particularly with respect to the Indians. So at 18 in 1827, he becomes a teacher of English in Hindu College, Calcutta. Hindu College is the carrier of new education. Hindu College uses English as the medium. It has many teachers who come from England and they teach. And teachers as teachers, whether they come from India or from England, in the final analysis, a teacher is supposed to give not merely ideas and insights to the students, but also values. And English teachers who had been trained in teaching in England, when they come here, then they are a mix of many things. Maybe they carry some of the prejudices. Maybe because they are white, therefore they will look down on us. But then a teacher is a very dramatic person in one's own consciousness. The teacher also looks at things from somebody else's angle, not only on one's own angle. So a teacher will not always talk in terms of I. The teacher also can talk in terms of you to the class, to which the teacher is talking, which the teacher is addressing. And then there is a third thing also called the world outside, which is neither the teacher nor the student, but the third world. And when the teacher looks at the third world, then sometimes in order to explain the truth of, in order to explain the opinion of, the people elsewhere will become objective. So if the teacher is talking about in a text a character, and the students say, okay, what does this character mean? What does he say? Is he useful for us? Or are his ideas going to harm us? If students ask that kind of a question, then the teacher would move out of himself and become something or somebody else. So it is this, this combination of ideas, combination of responses, combination of perspectives that puts teacher in the position of advantage. So these teachers have come to India in order to educate, in order to teach. They have their own knowledge and they are going to share. And then young, Derozio would later on join them as one of the staff. And he will be emulating many teachers who taught him here, and then he would talk like them. So teaching as a profession, teaching as an occupation is something that is special in all social circumstances. Because a teacher is not supposed to preach. A teacher is supposed to create ideas, produce ideas in the class with the help of the students. And this kind of a teaching that I am defining for you viewers, this teaching is different from the teaching that we generally know it for. And luckily for us, this person knew this particular essence of teaching, and therefore in the classroom he started making students think about the questions that were there surrounding them, in the context. So at 18 and 1827, Derozio became teacher of English in Hindu College, Calcutta. So he would go to the class, he will talk to the students, and he will raise questions. That is important. A teacher raising questions in the class, rather than just saying, okay, this is right and that is wrong, which is not teaching at all. That is merely preaching. But then this person is raising questions in the class. That is the, in fact, ethos and culture of Hindu College in the early 19th century. So let me give you an interesting quote from an old, student of, I call this Professor Iyengar, a student of Indian writing in English. He has a huge book, to his credit, and there I was able to locate this particular sentence that he had written for Derozio, and see this what the sentence says. He loved India and loved nature. Okay, you love India because you are an Indian, you are born here, you like people around you, and you want to write about them, and because you like them, therefore you love them. Okay, that's fine. He loved nature. Well, very few of us would love nature. Very few of us would even be aware of the presence of nature in our surroundings. Things are so difficult in life, there is a job situation, there is a livelihood thing, and conditions, which are there at home. They impinge on us all the time, on our freedom. Then we have friends, then we have relatives, then we have all other people who expect something or the other from us. So where is the time to look at nature? But then, if one has the inclination, if one has the will, then one will also look out through the window and see that there is nature outside. One would in fact go out of the home, out of the college, out of the town sometimes, out of the city, go into the lap of nature, as they would say, and then appreciate it. Appreciating nature, is it cutting off oneself from social surroundings? Not at all. In fact, when you go to nature, then you feel relaxed. Then you see a different kind of logic. In nature, you see spontaneity. Things happen on their own. There is a kind of inner urge in trees and flowers. At a particular time, the trees, will give out, leaves. Flowers, will start laughing and smiling at us. And that is a particular time. And later on, the things dry up, leaves dry up, and they fall. That also is nature. So this kind of a natural process and natural logic, this is there in nature. Now, when you are face to face with, when I am exposed to nature of this kind, with this kind of a logic inherent in it, then I may sometimes come back and apply that logic to conditions in life in reality. And then I realize that we are not spontaneous. We are not that natural. We don't have that kind of simplicity, that kind of innocence which nature has. So there is a kind of comparing and contrasting between nature on one side and society on the other. And this person, he loved India, he loved nature, says Professor Iyengar, and he also loved, and says Iyengar with a chuckle, his students. What does it mean? What does this professor mean when he says that he loved his students, he loved nature, and he loved India? Which means that he pedestalized students. He looked up to them. It's very rare for a teacher to love one's students, and particularly in the context where Professor Iyengar is pointing out, you love India, you love nature, you love your students. So which means India is equivalent. Students are equivalent to India. Students are equivalent to nature. So there are three sources of inspiration for this person, and all these three inspirations are of a slightly different kind. In India, particularly in the 19th century, people would not think of India even as such. I'm not a student of history, so I cannot go into the specifics of it. But I know that India in the early 19th century is not a one unified, broadly imagined, visualized country or a uniform culture. It's known for its diversities. It's known for its regions, its languages, its rich heritage, which is the heritage of variety, but not one India. But this person in the 19th century talks of India, which means that he is able to anticipate as to what is the requirement of India at that time. The requirement of this subcontinent, it is called. It's not called a country. Even today, when I read books, I find that India is being called a subcontinent. And then I go into the reasons why is it that India is not called a country but a subcontinent. The reason is that India is vast and India has many disparate, different aspects to it, because of which you can't identify that unifying factor which can be called India. But poets, thinkers, people who analyze, people who examine things closely, these people can see seeds of something that will sprout later on, after 20 years, after 30 years. And what is going to come then, that can be anticipated by a dreamer, by a teacher, by a student, by a person who has those imaginative capabilities. So this person has those imaginative capabilities and is able to think of that place which can be unified as a country, and therefore he loves India. When it comes to nature, I have already explained to you, but then nature doesn't mean merely objects of nature, not merely trees and streams. Nature is, as I said earlier, spontaneity, innocence. And when I see nature, I am immediately reminded of children. I am immediately reminded of women who are not exposed to the society outside and who behave naturally. I am reminded of old people who forget about their influences of the past and once again become innocent. So I start thinking of this, which means that nature and thinking about nature makes me aware of the humanity at large. So he learns his lessons in humanism from nature at that time, therefore he loves India, he loves nature. And third thing is students, and this is a tricky background. Loving students means that you are seeing your own image of your childhood among the students. So you are 22, you are maybe 18, at the age of 18 he joins. Then he looks at the students who are 14 or 15, and then he looks back to his own time when he was 14 to 15, so he can identify himself with them. And then if he identifies, if the teacher identified oneself with the students, then the teacher would have a different association with the students. So therefore he loves the students. There is another thing, and it is to be kept in mind. If one loves one's students, one is in fact loving the youth of the country. And what are the youth of the country? They are the future of the country. So what the country is going to become is later on to be determined by the behavior of the youth today. So these people will, when they grow up, when they become mature, when they have already got certain ideas crystallized in their behavior through their practice, then those people will practice the ideas and change the country. So when I see the youth, when I see the students, when I see people reading and writing, then I realize that, well, India is in safe hands. This is his attitude, because of which his classrooms, when he taught, became actually places where discussions happened. It was a kind of a seminar. This person is known as a seminarist in the real sense of the word, because he would throw questions at them. They will respond with their own answers, which will be half true, half wrong, whatever, because they will be talking directly in response to what he's asking, and they will bring in all their telltale descriptions, and then 2 or 3 people will have different versions of the reality that is posed in the form of the question, and then there will be a discussion, and in the discussion one doesn't know who is going to be proved right and who is going to be proved wrong. Maybe the teacher oneself also is proved wrong in the process, because in the world of ideas there is no seniority, juniority, there is no superiority, inferiority. In the world of ideas, what actually decides the truth of the idea is the quality of the response. And if the quality of response comes from the students, then obviously the truth will be said to be revealed by or produced by the student. So in fact, in the classroom, all of us, teachers and students, all of us are students, because we are then struggling and grappling with ideas, and then we think that finally in a better shape these ideas will govern our action for the future. So this person at that point of, and because he is a teacher of this kind, he loves his students, therefore he is all the time in the pattern of growing up, all the time in the pattern of learning new things, all the time in the pattern of producing ideas, and all these 3 things that I talked about, all these 3 things can sometimes rattle people outside the classroom. What is he teaching? What is he discussing? How is it a part of Indian ethos? He is going against tradition. He is going against this and that. So people start wondering outside the classroom, outside the college, as to what is happening in the college, that these people are discussing something which according to them is not relevant. So it's a tricky affair. It's a very courageous affair on the part of the student and the teacher, that they discuss things which are not supposed to go by the established norm and principle. So that thing also is there. If you have new ideas, those ideas will attack the old ideas. If the old ideas are attacked, then the people who hold the old ideas, they will be angry. And if they are angry, then they will make your life difficult to live. This is where the revolutionary role of this person is to be appreciated and understood. This person tells us very clearly that this is a new idea. This idea was not there earlier. For instance, the idea of economic equality or social equality, or the idea of equality between people from different castes. Suppose he starts saying this, then all those people who believe in the caste hierarchy in the country, they will go, you know, hammer and tongs at the students and teachers. And this is the fun, you know, of life, that when the new is fighting the old, then the old is very cruel, is very violent, and the new is full of freshness, the new is very full of enthusiasm. So it is this, you know, that finally makes him a poet. So from a teacher to a poet, and of course in his short career, he will you know, leave his teaching also, because he thinks that teaching confines you only to the classroom. So those elites, you know, those 20 or 30 people, 40 people, however many they are, these people, you know, are there, but then what about the rest? Those who don't have the facilities to become students of a college, where would they go? So this person will have an insight, and he would say, okay, from now onwards, I'll leave this college because this college you know, confines me only to such a number of students. I will go out and I would write. And then he would write not merely poetry. Poetry has been writing all through. Then he also would write what is called political comments, cultural comments, social comments. And he will create those ideas for other people to share. And he will then set in a process of that transformation, which would take the country forward in the direction of growth and progress. So with this, we will later on pick up, you know, some of his poems, and then we'll, you know, think of the examples as, you know, concreteness of shape, you know, that his ideas got in his poems. Thank you. Well, from here on, we'll be taking up some of his poems, and before I begin discussing his poems and commenting on them, and to tell you as to what concerns drive him, before that I would like to share an insight by a young scholar who wrote on Derozio, and this is the point she made. I'm referring to a scholar called Sajni Kripalani Mukherjee, and this is what she says about the time in which Derozio was writing. And she says that the upper caste group at the helm of affairs in Hindu college, well, she's referring to this group which sent its daughters and sons, particularly sons, to the college, and for education. So she's talking about them in its early years, thus attempted to bring Western science, liberal thought, and English thought, and English language, and literature to their sons. It's basically sons. And then English values, English thought, English perspective. This is what the Indian elites wanted then, and they sent people to Hindu college. But they were at the same time firmly resistant to all threat from culture alien to their own. So this was the contradiction, that the upper class in India at that time faced. The contradiction was that they wanted their children to get modern, scientific, secular education coming from England. At the same time, they were threatened by the crux of this education attacking Indian culture. So this thing, initially they may not have felt as acutely, as sharply, but later on they realized, and I pointed this out earlier also, that very soon this modernity starts somehow preying upon, struggling against or attacking some of the established ideas, and it is this that may have created issues and some kind of a critical atmosphere. You can call it an area where things are judged not on the basis of their acceptance but on the basis of their truth. So when this happens, then things become critical, and Hindu college then became a cauldron, became a place where things clashed, and where only the genuine ones finally emerged. So this process was there, and when this was set in, then the Indian upper classes would have realized that accepting modernity was not an easy job. It wasn't a cakewalk. It had to be mixed with certain dangers, certain risks, a kind of adventurous effort it had to become. And keeping this in mind, one can say that this person, Derozio, became a carrier of this contradictory process that happened in India's cultural life. So let's see in the light of this, that India is not unilinear, a straightforward kind of a country where the new is going to be welcomed and the old will be driven out. It is not that. There will be old and the new. Sometimes the old will also assert itself, and if it asserts itself, then we become eager to know whether modernity can take the kind of criticism that Indians will give it. So it is that kind of a critical juncture in India's history where the old will not be easily ousted by the new, and the new cannot remain alive and kicking, alive and inspiring till the old is shown the door. So either the old can stay or the new can stay. And the amalgam, as we generally say, and the compromise, the combination that we see is hard to get, is hard to achieve. So this is the situation, and it must have been really a very inspiring atmosphere at that point of time, that this person was able to wade through very difficult waters. And let's see how he was able to get around this. I'll be just reading out a few poems to you, and please keep in mind this particular contradiction, that the old would like to stay and the new would like to establish itself and throw the old back. In this kind of a scenario, what kind of poetry can be written? Now just see the strategies, just see the methods that this person is going to use in order to capture this process and to be on the side of modernity. So I'll just read out, and I'll just raise questions here, and you can think about the nature of poems that he's writing, the words that he's using, and why he's using those words. What is there behind those words? What is the idea behind those words that he wants to communicate through his poetry? Well, there's a place in Bihar called Raj Mahal, and the Raj Mahal, well, has been deserted People have left it. Nobody lives there now, and it's in a state of ruin. And how to look at this Raj Mahal today? Today means 1826 or 7, when this poem would be composed. And what kind of an attitude would the poet adopt to the ruins of Raj Mahal? Actually, Raj Mahal is a place all right in Bihar. It is also a symbol. It's a symbol of the old world, which is now in a state of ruin. Now it is on the way out. And what kind of attitude should one take towards it? And this is what this person says in poetic terms. He says, "How curve thy beauteous domes on high." He is asking a question from Raj Mahal. "Fair as the arch of yonder sky." He is appreciating the beauty of Raj Mahal. You see, the arch is is touching the sky, and softly in the fabric glide as Jamna flows to Ganges' side. He is able to spot from the Raj Mahal the two rivers joining together, and that's something that moves him, that inspires him. He is appreciating the beauty of Raj Mahal in the condition of those ruins, or like the lingering beam of light that sinks in the dusk of night. Well, he is welcoming Raj Mahal, but see his terms of welcoming. What he says is very clearly that there is light on one side, there is darkness on the other. There is day on the one side and there is night on the other. Now, at the time of day, you can't say there should be night. As you know also that at the time of night, you can't say that there has to be day. But then, as soon as the night begins, people in fact start working for, people start preparing for the day to break. Initially, they would like the night because night gives them sleep, and the night gives them rest. Night gives them relaxation. But when they have relaxed enough, let's say around 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, when they are fresh, then they start waiting for the dawn. In fact, dawn is always for the future. The early morning is always is to symbolize future. And well, when he is talking about this, then he understands the reality of the Raj Mahal. But then he also sees the process of fight between that which was yesterday and that which is today. So night has to be followed by the day, and but he's not completely outrightly rejecting the old world, the ruins of Raj Mahal. They hold a kind of fascination for us. Like if one is 20 years and one has to be reminded, if one is reminded of one's childhood, then one doesn't feel ashamed of one's childhood. In fact, it is because of this childhood that one became finally the young person that one is. And if that is the case, then you have to put childhood in a perspective. Well, childhood is one, but the second thing that also may come to mind in this case is that the parents who were young earlier, now they are old, and the grandparents have already died. So in that case, what attitude should one have towards grandparents? That's the question. I think the attitude that one should have towards the grandparents is that they have lived their life to the full, and now you can't miss them. Now you have to accept the fact, and you have to carry forward their grit and their struggle to fight in their own way. And that is possible only when you let bygones be bygones, and when you enter the era of modernity, and when you start living life on its own terms or on your terms, and later on you create your own future. So it is this kind of a vision that is working behind this poem. It's the ruins of Raj Mahal, and well, calling Raj Mahal a ruin is something that gives us the idea of acceptance of the ruin. That now it's a ruin, now you can't bring it back to life. You can't rebuild Raj Mahal in the same manner in which it existed many years ago. You have to see the ruins. You have to have a neutral view of it, and finally you have to accept the fact. So the other thing that comes to mind, and I thought I should also share this with you, is that when you find some kind of a beauty in old things, then there is a different kind of modernity in your own life, in your own time, which would say, why bother about the old? It's not beautiful at all. Now, who will say this is the question. I don't think any sensible person would say that past is all dead and gone. Say, a sensible person would always say, no, that past was beautiful. It reminds us of our childhood. And when you start looking towards the past, some people have called it a kind of weakness in romanticism. I would not like to take position here on this. But then romantics were supposed to always look towards the past as something sweet, as something nice. and against which the present failed. This is another contradiction. So, not that all that is new is good. Some new may be much worse than what existed a number of years ago. So, the romantics, would criticize the present also, and you will see that very soon the poet we are discussing and the people who came in touch with him as his students or as his fellow travelers, all these people would then ask this question, that old is not all that bad. Old has a kind of beauty of itself, and this is precisely what some of the romantics always taught, always thought, always conveyed in their poetry to the readers. So, this is an aspect of romanticism, and I think it's a very valuable idea that all that is there today in the name of the new is not worth welcoming. Let's be clear about it. Whatever you come across as something new can be absolutely wrong. In that case, have the courage to negate it, to oppose it, and then make things beautiful in the manner in which you have been thinking of them as beautiful. So, when that is the case, then romanticism comes through the back door, and this person is able to tell us that the ruins of Raj Mahal actually remind us of the beauty that existed in India in the past. So, this is the kind of contradiction that is there, appreciated by, recognized by the poet, and finally it is this form that it achieves in the process. So, it's a romantic poem to the core, in this sense that old is supposed to be very beauteous. He is using the word beauteous. Old is very inspiring, and because it is inspiring, at the same time it has to be accepted as something that is old. You can't bring it back to life, but then you can take inspiration from it. So, that's the idea that comes across. Now, viewers, I may ask a question from myself and from you. I was saying something different when I said that old has to be rejected and the new has to be brought in. Now, that idea is negated by this poem. In fact, this poem is saying that sometimes you can take inspiration from the old and you can think of a beauty which has passed from the earth. I am quoting a romantic poet. I am quoting Wordsworth. So, Wordsworth is around, Keats is around, Shelley is around, Byron is around. All these romantic poets in the 19th century, they also are around when this person is writing, and he has read them and he is steeped in their poetry, because of which this person has a kind of varied approach, an approach which is full of complexity and which is full of richness, and this richness and complexity is something that we have to appreciate. Now, I will go to another poem from here, from this Ruins of Raj Mahal, which gives us a picture of a different kind than the one that India may have required, because the poet is not all the time talking about meeting the requirement. India at that time also requires things from poets which will talk of value rather than the requirements. The other poem that I quote from and I'll be talking about is The Harp of India. The harp of India, the musical instrument, the singing, you can sing along with the harp. And why does he call it the harp of India? Maybe the art of India, maybe the sense of celebration in India, maybe he's talking about the possibilities of artistic evolution and growth in India at that time. Was historically much of artistic growth possible in the 19th century? Is a question that you have to think about. My answer is that that's not the time when India has any kind of prosperity, has any kind of fresh ideas. India is what India is going to become in the latter half of the 19th century is something that is totally missing in the first half of the 19th century. So, India cannot think of all those good options that will finally emerge in India later. So, let us see what he says about India in the poem which is titled The Harp of India. Why hang'st thou on yon withered bough, unstrung forever, must thou there remain? Asking a question. 2 lines, 2 questions. First, why hang'st thou on yon withered bough? Talking about India or the harp of India. That you are there hanging on the bough of the tree there, and the tree's branch, the bough is actually withered. So, in India you can see that it's an old India. And then it says about the harp, the musical instrument, you are unstrung. You are not ready to give out music. You see, the music can be created from the musical instrument only when it is in a good shape. But India's harp, India's musical instrument is not in a good shape. Therefore, it is unstrung And will it always remain like this? Good question. The poet is asking the country, will your musical instrument really give out music, or it will remain bad forever? He is asking this. Thy music once was sweet, who hears it now? None, he says. And he doesn't say none, but then that's the meaning of the line. There was a good music in India, that must have been 200 years ago, 300 years ago then, maybe in the 16th century, in the Mughal period when India was, going across all shades of progress into a very bright future. India in the 15th, 16th centuries was a different kind of India. But where is that India gone now in the 19th century? This is the question that this person is raising. And the last line is, why does the breeze sigh over thee with her fatal chain? The breeze is behaving like, the breeze is appearing as the fatal chain of the country, as a chain, which is binding India into some kind of submission. And that chain is fatal, that chain is deadly. And he knows, that India is not the same country that it was earlier, many centuries ago. Why is the poet saying just the opposite of what he was doing there in the previous poem is the question. I will not answer the question. I will leave it for you to discuss. I will only say that the question is whether India can really progress from that point of weakness. The poet has found it at the time. So, if he is raising this question, and this question is not raised in Indian poetry in this kind of a sharp form, so which means that some credit for asking the question in this particular form goes to his English education. He has read romantic poetry, he wants to raise questions, and he is asking a rhetorical question. The answer of that will be, well, very soon. How long will India remain like this? The answer should be, not very long, we will come back, because that's what. But then at the moment, let's say it's a mood of sadness, it's a mood of melancholy, and there is some melancholy built in, so far as this poem is concerned. But then that melancholy also has its obverse side, has its other side. And if he's raising the question, how long can you survive like this? One answer is, well, I'll survive forever. The other answer is, no. I will try to find out what is wrong with me, what is wrong with my country, and then I'll try to get an answer to this. So when one is raising the question, then in the question there are two possibilities of the answer. One possibility is that the answer is positive, and the other is that it is negative. From here, I go to, after this kind of a difficult question is posed by the poet, then I go to the next, let's see as to what the author has to say about the cultural condition and about the literary, expression. Then there is a quiet place. Writing about the quiet place in the 19th century, what idea does this give us? It's a quiet place. Quiet can be of two kinds. One, that people are resting, they are happy, they are relaxed. There is a kind of tranquility in the country. The other is that people have no power. People have no strength, no energy, and therefore it's the quiet of the dead. Which is what the author is telling us. Let's find out from here. How many a wretch in this most silent hour pierces the darkness with his dying scream. See the words? The words are dark, the words are dying scream, which means it's a negative poem. It's a poem about dying, it's a poem about pain, it's a poem about deprivation, it's a poem about hunger. India cannot remain like this forever. How many a wretch is the poor person, in this most silent hour pierces the darkness with his dying scream. Poor people, they die and they scream before they die, and that scream, comes across through the solitude, through the silent hour that he's talking about. How many a captive in the dungeon tower, captive, the imprisoned people who have been captured, the people who have been kept in dungeons to live there till their case can be discussed and resolved. So prisoners are there in the dungeon tower, and how long will they remain there? And then he says, shrinks from the fate which comes with morning beam. Certainly, in the last line, there is some ray of hope. Maybe when the sun rises, when there is a new sunbeam in the morning, maybe that's the time when things will come to an end. Once again, a kind of longing. a kind of desire for things to turn in the right direction. And recognition of the present direction is very clearly located in the poem here. India is not in a good shape. India is a poor country. India is being visited by famines all the time. There is hunger, there is destitution, people don't have jobs, and they generally have one meal a day, and particularly in the villages, people suffer a lot. All this person is able to see. So I would like to, in fact, ask this question from myself and from fellow scholars as to how many poets in the early 19th century were talking about this kind of a situation. Some were. India had, at that point of time, some very great poets. I cannot vouch for poetry being written all over India, but I can tell you, as I come from North India, that there were Urdu poets at the time. There was Mir Taqi Mir, who was around, an old man, but he was there. Ghalib was shaping up into a poet. Then there was, Nazir Akbar Abadi as a poet. These poets were talking about the poor. They were talking about the conditions at that time, but they could be counted on fingertips. Which means that the literary trend, the cultural trend at the time in India was not in favor of realizing the potential of India that will finally come to fruition later. That was not being discussed. And in fact, people were not focusing upon this. They were focusing upon other things. There would be cultural, idols, icons. There would be Krishna and Radha. There is nothing wrong or right about Krishna and Radha. That's fine. But in the 19th century, when people are stricken with poverty, when they are stricken with illiteracy, at that point of time, one is supposed to be sad. And great poets are always sad, because they find the world not worth living in. And therefore, they can't, feign pleasure, feign, any celebration. So, Derozio is a serious poet. Derozio is talking about, the conditions that are stringent, the conditions that are difficult to live in. And if he is doing that, then of course he is a great poet. Only great poets, see this kind of a sense of pain, are going through the country at that point of time. Then I take one more poem, and then if one quotation from his prose, expression that will come later. But first the excerpt from the poem "Hymn to the Sun." This is a different kind of poem. He is addressing the sun, and when you address the sun, then you forget about things around you. Then you are not looking at the earth at all. You are not looking at society. So far, he has looked at society. He has looked about the wretches. He has looked about darkness. He has looked about prisoners. He has looked about harp and music and all. But in this particular part, he is now talking to the sun. And it's a song, it's a hymn that he is writing, and that is addressed to the sun. Let's see what he says. God of this beauteous world. Obviously, sun is the God of the beauteous world. The world is beautiful only because sun is there. If sun were not there, then there would be no light in the on the planet, and one can't spot any good thing. So it is because of the sun, that we have this appreciation of this presence of beauty around us. God of this beauteous world, whom earth and heaven adore in concert love. Very nice. There is a love concert, and earth and heaven are adoring the world, whose praise is hymned by the eternal seven. Whose praise? The sun's praise. He is praising the sun. And the eternal seven, the seven stars, it is these, which are also praising, and they are praising in song form. They are singing. They are singing, paeans. They are singing, good songs of celebration in order to, praise the sun. Bright wheeling minstrels of the court above. So you can see the range of this poem. This poem is about seven stars. This poem is about the sun. This poem about the light going from all sides. He talks about the beauty going through all the places, and just because of the sun. So you can see that the range of the poet, the range of the descriptions here is elemental. He is not talking about one or the other person. He is not talking about the hunger. He is not talking about the pain, which is confined to the present moment. He is talking about the sun and the stars. He is talking about the sky. What does it mean? It means that the poet also is a dreamer. The poet talks about the actual things in life. At the same time, he can't withhold himself from dreaming big. And when you dream big, then you think of the sky, the earth, the planet Earth, you think of the sun, and you think of the stars. So it means that it starts from the Raj Mahal, which is in ruins. It talks about the harp of India, which can't give out music because it's an old harp and it is unstrung. Then it talks about the quiet place, where people cannot express their ideas because they don't have any strength to do so. And finally, he talks about the sun, the stars, and the earth. So it means that the poet has this wide range. So a boy of 22 years, a young man of 22 years, is able to cover different areas of expression, different areas of his eye, his sight, and his senses that the area is available to. And then you know that the range is really remarkably big, and he is not an ordinary poet. He is not a poet who is confined only to the city. He is a poet who goes beyond the village, beyond the city, beyond the rivers, up to the sky, and up to the sun. So the last thing, I'll just take 1 or 2 minutes to conclude this. After this range that he has given, that he also, towards the end of his life, he was able to cover what can be called the actual ideas, the ideas that were required. Here in his poems, he was talking only about the images. He was talking about certain perceptions that he had. But then because he was a person of education and he was talking all the time and he was seminaring in his classes, therefore he would like to communicate directly also with the students. So then he was a thinker. I call him an intellectual, a poet who is also an intellectual. And with this kind of a description of the intellectual poet and the imaginative poet, and then the poet with the sense of dreaming, and a romantic poet, with these 3 or 4 aspects, I finish the discussion, and thank you.
With this note, thank you, sir. Thank you so very much. And dear friends, if you want to give a feedback for this particular lecture, then you can mail us at info.cc@nic.in. We would be meeting again very soon and would be talking on another topic under this series, Indian Writing in English. Till then, take care. Goodbye. Thank you, sir. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.